Imagine the universe before stars, atoms, dimensions, or time. Before light existed, there was no darkness, because darkness only has meaning when light can be absent. Before there was a self, there was no other. Now imagine that everything that would ever exist was contained within a single, indivisible principle. Not a tiny object floating in empty space, because space did not yet exist. Not the first thing among many things, but the condition that made the existence of many things possible. For 2,000 years, philosophers, mystics, mathematicians, and initiates have used one name for this mystery: the monad. The word comes from the Greek word monas, meaning unity, or that which is one. But the monad is not simply the number one within a sequence. It is the principle through which anything can be recognized as one thing at all. It is unity before counting, identity before division, and the center before the circumference. The monad does not mean exactly the same thing in every tradition. For the Pythagoreans, it could represent the source of number. For the Neoplatonists, it echoed the ineffable one. Gnostic texts used it to describe the invisible divine source. John Dee transformed it into a cosmic hieroglyph. Leibniz described indivisible centers of reality, and later, Theosophy placed the monad within the spiritual anatomy of the human being. These meanings are related, but they are not identical. The real mystery is this: how can the one become the many without ever ceasing to be one? In Pythagorean and later Neo-Pythagorean thought, number was not merely a tool for measuring things. Number revealed the structure of reality itself. Nicomachus of Gerasa treated unity as the principle through which number arises. Later texts described the monad as potentially both odd, and even because it could generate both while being reduced to neither. This was not ordinary mathematics. It was metaphysics expressed through arithmetic. The monad represented unity. The dyad represented difference. The monad said, "It is." The dyad introduced the distinction between this and that. With difference came contrast. With contrast came relationship. And with relationship came form. Symbolically, a point has no length, width, or depth. Move that point, and a line appears. Extend the line, and a surface becomes possible. Give that surface depth, and form emerges. From the silent point, geometry unfolds. From unity, multiplicity appears. But the dyad should not be misunderstood as something evil. Without difference, nothing could be perceived. There would be no observer and observed, no sound and silence, and no lover and beloved. Separation may be a source of conflict, but it is also the condition that makes experience possible. So consider this question: do you think separation is an illusion that must be overcome, or is it a necessary part of existence? Share your answer in the comments, because this question quietly divides entire schools of philosophy. Greek philosophy developed this mystery even further. Plato placed unity near the center of the search for the highest principle. But in the 3rd century, Plotinus gave us one of the most powerful expressions of the One. For Plotinus, the One is not simply the greatest being. It exists beyond every category through which beings are defined. To call it a thing would be to limit it. To say that it thinks would divide it into the thinker and the object being thought about. The One exists prior even to that distinction. From the One proceeds intellect, followed by soul, through which the cosmos becomes possible. This is not a mechanical act of creation, as though pieces were being cut away from divinity. The sun gives off light, without being diminished by every ray it produces. The many proceed from the one, but the one never becomes less. Everything that proceeds from the one also carries a hidden tendency to return. Reality moves outward toward multiplicity and inward toward its source. Neoplatonic spirituality is therefore a path of recollection. The soul, scattered among objects, passions, and appearances, gradually turns back toward the unity upon which its life depends. When this question entered Gnostic traditions, the distance between the divine source and the visible world took on a much more dramatic meaning. In the Apocryphon of John, preserved in manuscripts discovered at Nag Hammadi, the highest reality is described as the invisible spirit, the monad above all authority, immeasurable and beyond comprehension. It is not a human-like ruler sitting somewhere inside the universe. It is the unknowable source from which the divine fullness unfolds. From this source appears Barbello, described through symbols of forethought, image, womb, and first emanation. Further aeons and powers follow. The exact sequence varies across different versions and schools because Gnosticism was never one perfectly unified religion. Even so, a recurring pattern remains. Divine fullness becomes increasingly differentiated, and at the lower levels of the story, ignorance appears. The world of limitation is not merely far from the source in terms of space. It is far from the source in terms of awareness. This is why Gnostic myth remains so psychologically powerful. The fall is not only something that happened in a mythical past. It happens whenever consciousness mistakes a fragment for the whole. Whenever a role becomes an identity, a possession becomes a self, or a temporary condition becomes a final truth. The drama of forgetfulness is repeated. In this context, the monad is the forgotten origin. Hermetic philosophy approaches unity in a different way. In the Corpus Hermeticum, God, mind, the cosmos, and humanity all belong to a living and intelligible universe. To know yourself is not merely to list your personality traits. It means recognizing the deeper source of mind and life. A similar degree of caution is necessary when discussing Kabbalah. It is tempting to say that the monad is simply Ein Sof or simply Keter, but that would flatten two distinct systems into one. Ein Sof refers to boundless divine infinity beyond all definition. Keter is the crown, the first sephira within the articulated order. Both can illuminate the movement from hidden unity into manifestation, but they are not interchangeable labels. If you value explanations that make these connections without erasing the traditions themselves, this is a good moment to like the video. It helps more people discover esoteric content that goes beyond surface-level symbolism. In 1564, the English scholar, astrologer, mathematician, and ceremonial magician, John Dee, published one of the most enigmatic works of the Renaissance, the Hieroglyphica, also known as the Hieroglyphic Monad. Dee's symbol combines the sun, the moon, planetary elements, the cross, and Aries. The sun and the moon suggest polarity. The cross evokes the elemental world, while Aries suggests fire and beginning. Together, these elements compress celestial, mathematical, and alchemical realities into a single visual grammar. Dee's monad should not be reduced to the simple image of a dot inside a circle, even though the circumpunct is itself a powerful image of centered unity. Dee's glyph is a carefully constructed symbolic machine. It shows unity containing difference and organizing that difference into one coherent whole. Then, during the early 18th century, the word entered a very different philosophical system. Before we continue, I have prepared something special for you that could make a real difference in your studies. I created a teaching method inspired by 12 of the most influential works in esotericism and transformed them into 12 educational documentaries. These documentaries were designed to help anyone understand these concepts more easily and learn how to apply them in everyday life. You will also receive a complete collection of supporting materials, including your own personalized AI agent. You will receive lifetime access, along with a 7-day money-back guarantee in case the program is not right for you. Get access now through the first pinned comment or by scanning the QR code on your screen. Take advantage of our special launch offer. Now let's return to the topic of the video. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz wrote the Monadology in 1714. For Leibniz, reality is composed of simple substances called monads. These monads have no parts, which means they cannot be divided. However, they are not tiny physical particles. A monad is closer to an indivisible center of perception. Every monad expresses the universe from its own unique point of view. A stone, a plant, an animal, and a human being do not perceive reality to the same degree. However, Leibniz's universe is not made of dead matter, moved only by external forces. It is a universe of interiority. This is the meaning behind the famous claim that monads have no windows. Nothing literally enters a monad as though perception were being poured into a container. The harmony among monads is explained through what Leibniz called pre-established harmony. Each monad develops according to its own internal law, yet all monads correspond with one another within the order of the whole. Here, the monad undergoes a remarkable transformation. It is no longer only the single source standing above multiplicity. Reality itself is composed of countless unities, with each one reflecting the cosmos from a unique perspective. Individuality and universality are no longer simple opposites. One landscape can be seen through many windows, and each window reveals the whole from a position that no other window occupies. Later esoteric movements brought the word into the spiritual anatomy of the human being. In theosophical literature, the monad generally refers to the highest spiritual principle within the human constitution. However, the terminology must be handled carefully. In some formulations, the human monad is primarily Atma-Buddhi, meaning spirit united with spiritual intuition or wisdom. In broader presentations, its expression is discussed in relation to the higher triad, including higher manas, or the higher mind. These terms are not used in exactly the same way by every theosophical author. Helena Blavatsky often warned against imagining spiritual principles as separate objects stacked inside a person. They are better understood as levels or modes through which consciousness functions. The personality is temporary. It includes social identity, memories, desires, wounds, ambitions, and the name carried throughout one lifetime. Behind the personality stands a deeper continuity, sometimes called the reincarnating individuality. Beyond that lies the spiritual principle from which consciousness descends. The monad is not the personality. It is not your profession, your opinions, your fears, or the story you repeatedly tell yourself about who you are. Yet these things are not meaningless. The personality is an instrument through which experience becomes possible. Think about an old photograph of yourself. Perhaps you were a child. Your body was different. Your beliefs, fears, friendships, and desires may have changed completely. Yet when you look at that image, something within you says, "That was me." What exactly is the me that survived all of those changes? Memory cannot provide a complete answer because much of the past has been forgotten. The body is continually changing. Personality can be transformed by grief, love, illness, discipline, and time. This ordinary experience does not prove the existence of a metaphysical monad. However, it helps explain why so many traditions searched for a center deeper than the constantly changing personality. Thelema offers an interesting comparison. In the Book of the Law, every man and every woman is described as a star. A star has its own orbit, its own law, and its own center. This idea resonates with spiritual individuality, but it would be careless to declare that the Theosophical monad, Hadith, the star, the true will, and the holy guardian angel are all the same concept. The connection is much subtler. Authentic spiritual unity does not necessarily erase individuality. It may reveal the deepest law of individuality. Many people assume that unity means dissolving into a featureless cosmic substance where every distinction disappears. However, in several traditions, returning to unity is not annihilation. It is integration. A musician does not destroy the notes in order to create harmony. Harmony appears when distinct notes enter into the right relationship with one another. The same principle applies to spiritual life. The ego is not simply an enemy that must be murdered. The personality must make decisions, protect boundaries, fulfill responsibilities, survive loss, and act within the world. The problem begins when the instrument declares itself to be the source of the music. Why then do we not perceive the monad directly? The answer is that ordinary perception depends on contrast. We notice sound against silence, movement against stillness, and the self against the world. However, the ground of awareness cannot easily be perceived as an object because it is the very thing through which objects are perceived. You cannot step outside your own awareness and look at it in the same way you would look at a chair. This is why contemplative traditions use silence, meditation, prayer, self-inquiry, ethical discipline, and ritual. Their purpose is not always to produce visions. Their purpose can be to loosen the belief that every passing thought or temporary role represents the total self. Have you ever experienced a moment when the boundary between you and the world seemed to become thinner? It may have happened while you were in nature, during prayer, while listening to music, in a moment of grief, or in complete silence. Describe your experience in the comments if you feel comfortable doing so. These experiences do not all have the same explanation, but they reveal how unstable our ordinary sense of separation can be. Now return to the simplest image, a point inside a circle. The point represents unity without extension. The circle represents totality, field, cycle, and manifestation. The center remains still while every point along the circumference is related to it. Draw a radius, and the hidden center becomes connected to the visible boundary. Multiply the radii, and a single center sustains countless directions. As a point, the monad is origin. As a center, it is identity. As the source of number, it is the possibility of order. As the one, it is the principle beyond division. As a Gnostic image, it is the forgotten fullness beyond ignorance. As D's hieroglyph, It is the cosmos compressed into a signature. As Leibniz's monad, it is an indivisible perspective, reflecting the whole. As a spiritual principle, it is the deepest unity behind the changing human personality. This allows us to correct three common mistakes. First, the monad does not always mean God. In some systems, it refers to supreme unity. In others, it refers to individual metaphysical centers or to the highest spiritual principle within a human being. Second, all traditions are not secretly teaching the same doctrine. Similar symbols can emerge within very different metaphysical worlds. Third, the monad does not require us to reject multiplicity. The many may be the means through which unity becomes knowable. The journey is not necessarily an escape from the world. It may instead be a recovery of the center within experience. The monad is unity before division, unity hidden within diversity, and the possibility of returning to wholeness without erasing everything that was learned through separation. At the beginning of this video, the point appeared almost empty. Now it contains a history of philosophy, mysticism, mathematics, cosmology, and spiritual psychology. But the final question is not historical. Behind everything within you that changes, is there something that witnesses those changes without being completely reduced to them? Behind every identity you have worn, every belief you have abandoned, and every version of yourself that has disappeared, is there a deeper center? Perhaps the monad is not an answer that can be possessed. Perhaps it is the question that appears when consciousness turns back toward its own source. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring the symbols, traditions, and hidden structures that shaped esoteric thought. Like the video if it gave you a deeper understanding of the monad, and share it with someone who has ever wondered how the one becomes the many. A playlist will appear on the screen in just a moment. Click it to continue, because the monad explains the mystery of unity. But the next journey begins where unity enters symbols, worlds, and states of consciousness. Have you ever noticed that the more you study Western esotericism, the more fragmented everything can start to feel? One book leads you to another author, another symbol, and another tradition. Before long, you have a growing collection of videos, PDF files, and notes, but no clear understanding of how everything fits together. That is exactly why Esoteric Atlas, 12 Classics Decoded, was created. It is a documentary-style self-study program that guides you through 12 foundational works by Aleister Crowley, Helena Blavatsky, Eliphas Levi, Manly P. Hall, Dion Fortune, and Israel Regardie. Each 45-minute lesson follows the MAP method. First, you map the author and the historical context. Next, you analyze the central symbols and teachings using clear, accessible language. Then you put what you have learned into practice through guided reflection, journaling exercises, and focused study prompts. For every book, you will also receive an illustrated e-book, a detailed mind map, a specialized glossary, and a guided journaling worksheet. That gives you a total of 48 downloadable study resources, along with a custom AI study companion, designed to help you clarify difficult ideas and explore meaningful connections between the teachings. You do not need more disconnected information. You need a map. The first 100 students can receive lifetime access for only $49.99, protected by a 7-day money-back guarantee. After that, the regular price will be $99.99. Explore the complete curriculum and view the current offer through the link in the description. You will receive immediate lifetime access, and your purchase will be fully protected by a 7-day money-back guarantee. Start seeing the deeper structure behind Western esotericism with Esoteric Atlas. And do not leave just yet. I have put together an organized playlist so you can continue your journey right here on the channel. Click one of the playlists appearing on your screen right now, and I will see you in the next video.